So if you've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for any amount of time, you've heard words thrown around like, casual players or scrubs or budget players or, playing just for fun, whatever. And you've probably heard terms like pro players or competitive players or meta players. In today's video, I want to compare and contrast the difference between casual and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh in a way that I feel is fair. I think that the best way to approach it is to just kind of view like what each focuses on and what they don't focus on. And then from there, it might give you more perspective on how the other side thinks. Point one, originality. With casual players, originality is key. The idea of being creative, the idea of making your own deck and playing it your own way is a really big deal, and you'll oftentimes see people get kind of criticized for copying the same old deck, the same cookie cutter build, everyone plays the same thing, there's no originality, these people are sheep. For a lot of casual players, and this includes myself, I have a casual side too, and I've been there as well, it feels like, look, what is Yu-Gi-Oh if you're not kind of playing your own creation? It's supposed to be your deck, and it's supposed to be, the cards that you picked out, the strategies that you made, not just kind of taking something from somebody else. Competitive players, really the idea of mimicry is kind of like flattery. It's like, how they say the best artists steal. The goal is winning, and if you know that there's a deck list proven to perform, proven to do well, get good placings at events, it really makes perfect sense then to copy it, to play it almost card for card, because you want to increase your chances of winning. It's not really about, being the most creative guy in the room. It's about being able to take the same deck and pilot it better, whereas you as a player are, playing better than your opponent, not necessarily that your deck is drastically different. The next point is how you're supposed to win as a casual player versus a competitive player. So for a lot of casual players, winning isn't necessarily enough. Oftentimes the idea is to show off your biggest, baddest combos, right? Get out your boss monster, or, make a certain play, X amount of times, or get set up, or even play with your food before you eat it. Comparatively, with competitive players, a win is kind of a win. That's why you see more strategies that are, focused on like FTKs or, OTKs, because the goal is to win as quickly as possible. An FTK might or might not be flashy, but it wins, and it doesn't make the win any less valuable. The reason these 2 points kind of diverge so much is because it's just a difference in mindset, right? One person is just simply trying to get the W, and the other person wants to maybe have fun with it, or really do what their deck is supposed to do. And I think that it kind of bleeds a little bit into deck building too, where you'll see competitive or meta players throwing in engines like Predaplants, Brilliant Fusion, those types of things, because it's really all about getting to a certain goal. You want consistency, you want to quickly reach the goal, whereas some casual players might enjoy kind of just playing their deck pure and not adding in all these engines and all of these kaijus and things that kind of dilute the strategy. They just want to have fun. The next point is consistency and numbers versus sort of freedom and autonomy. With casual players, the idea of deck building, as I sort of alluded to earlier, is you want to be able to put in the cards you want. You don't want to feel super constrained, right? You can run 40, or you can run 41 or 42. It's not as, strained and constricted. Ratios aren't super set in stone. Sometimes you'll run 3 copies of a card that might be really dead, maybe like mid to late game, but you run it because you want to run 3 copies of it. And comparatively, a lot of competitive players then will really kind of nail down ratios. It's all about numbers. I mean, there are websites dedicated to grinding these out and giving you probabilities that you'll draw a certain card, because no one wants to draw dead hands. Everybody wants to draw the cards that they need to see as quickly as possible while not drawing the cards they don't want to see. It's kind of a numbers game, and so a lot of stuff is more finely tuned if you're coming from a more competitive point of view. But if you're a casual player, these things might not matter as much to you. And it isn't to say that you can't care about that stuff and you can't try to optimize a build, but oftentimes those things are less important and they sort of take a back seat to just the idea of creativity and the idea of kind of playing it how you want to. The next point is how the value of cards are kind of seen. So I guess I should explain that. It might be a bit vague. For a lot of casual players, people choose cards to include in a deck based on how useful they might be with certain other cards or at a certain point in the game. A sort of sentiment that I hear a lot from some casual players are things along the lines of, well, I'm running this card because it'll be helpful if my opponent does this thing, or, you know, and like once these cards are in the graveyard, then I can use, say, Call of the Hunted to bring them back. From a competitive point of view, though, a lot of cards are kind of screened a bit more rigorously, right? You know, you don't really run cards that aren't going to be helpful in your first turn. And like I said earlier with ratios, I mean, you don't really run any more additional copies of cards than you need to have. It's not necessarily about, you know, what ifs or what, you know, what if this happens, what if that happens. It's more like, I just want the most likely, like the best outcome to be the most likely outcome. And nothing else really makes as much of a difference. And last but not least is how you interact with your opponent kind of changes. So for a lot of casual players, the idea is to sort of like play a bit more laid back, right? You're trying to see what your opponent's strategy is. You're not necessarily trying to, you know, kill them as fast as possible. And you oftentimes sort of trust your opponent, take them at their word. You know, you're more interested in seeing how they play and how their deck plays. I think something that's a little bit different with competitive players is, and this isn't a bad thing, but it is that you kind of approach every match with just a level of distrust. Not, you know, like it's not that you hate your opponent. I mean, maybe that's the case for some people, but it's kind of more like you always need to watch your opponent's hand, watch your opponent's grave, you know, kind of like keep a track on them, and always, you know, read cards, always make sure that things are resolving properly, ask people to announce phases. I think that for a lot of casual players, this comes off as like, you know, they're being a try-hard, or they're being like really, you know, uptight and all that. But I don't really think that's the case. I just think that, you know, as a competitive player, oftentimes your goal is to win, and when you're in a tournament setting, people do cheat, and people, you know, might even just make mistakes. And so the idea is that you need to keep a watch on your opponent, keep a watch on yourself, make sure that things resolve properly, things are announced, things are known, because you don't want to have to, like, you know, get a judge over, have some complication, potentially get a game lost because you didn't keep up with something. So those are the differences, for me at least, between casual and competitive players. I mean, I don't think that there is a hero and a villain here. It just sort of depends on who you ask, who you are, what you want out of Yu-Gi-Oh! But hopefully this video was helpful for maybe providing a bit of perspective. Especially if you're a new player and you're trying to decide, you know, is competitive play the direction you want to go toward, or is casual play the direction you want to go toward? I want to hear from you though. What would you say are the biggest key differences, you know, between playing this game to win per se and just playing for fun? I'd like to know down in the comments, and also give me a thumbs up if you like the video, subscribe, make sure that you hit the notification bell so you'll hear about all the new videos. I'm going to be trying to do a lot of really good stuff this summer. You can also follow me on social media, check out my sponsor, TCG Player, and I think I've gone on long enough. So that's going to be it. I'll see you guys in the next one.